Hello, I hope you're having a fantastic day. I hope you've had a fantastic start to the year with your reading. Today we're going to be looking at my Q1, rating the 25 fantasy books I read to start off this year and having a quick chat about them to see how I rank them. We've got S tier as perfection, can't fault a book. We've got our A tier as loved it, so just everything I've thoroughly enjoyed and loved. We've got our B tier as fun time, just this book's a fun time. You can read it, have a good time with it, but it might not be the best thing ever. Then we've just got our C tier as mid, just meh sort of books. And then we got weak tea for anything disappointing. Just like when you order tea or coffee at the shop and it comes out being weak, it's like, what's the point? I could have just had water. We'll start off with what the app's giving me. We've got Gardens of the Moon, Steven Erikson. Ooh, this goes between fun time and loved it. We'll put it at the top of B at the moment. So far, Gardens of the Moon was just finding my feet with the Novellas and Book of the Fallen series, and it wasn't as confusing as people say it is, but it's still more to think about than a regular series because we don't just have one main character that we're following or one main story that we're following. We're just following the story of the Malazan Empire as it's trying to grow, as it's dealing with people trying to rebel. And in Gardens of the Moon, we were just seeing the Malazan Empire trying to conquer a continent, and there was a lot of interesting things going around the city. So I think we'll put it at the top of fun time, but we may put it at the end of loved it as we go. We'll come back to that. So next up, we've got Murtagh by Christopher Paolini, and this one's going to go straight into week T. This was such a disappointing read. I was so excited to return to the world of Allegatia, and this one, following some side characters from a great series, was just so boring. The pacing was ridiculous. The amount of side quests, the amount of time it took to get anything done was just so ridiculous. It was 600 pages when it should have been like 300. Again, I love the Aragon and Inheritance cycle, but Murtagh, boring. Then next we have, I don't know whether this will be top of bottom of perfection or top of loved it. We'll put it at perfection for now. The Blade itself, book one of the First Law trilogy by J. Abercrombie. This one was so fun. The plot wasn't heavy, but because the character work was so enjoyable, and I just loved hanging out with Giselle and Glockter as we're in like this Game of Thrones inspired world and story. It was just a ton of fun. And next we had The Ice. This was a novella from the Bound and the Broken series by Ryan Cahill, and this one tells us the story that takes place right before book one of Blood and Fire, and it was really enjoyable. But it wasn't the best story I've ever read, and it was just okay. So we'll put it in fun time. It was definitely a good read. It was probably the weakest novella of the three, and it's one of the weaker stories in the series that is full of S tier and A tier books. Oh, now we're going to the first book I read this year. My friend got me to read the Hunger Games series. I started off the year with Catching Fire, book two of the Hunger Games. And yeah, this was another fun read, and so was Mockingjay. You might just put that as a little bit higher. And yeah, it's a really good series, and I'm really happy I read the Hunger Games. It's not something I'd normally read, but I can so easily see why it's so popular. Katniss, the way her story is told, is she's not just someone that just does everything herself. Like she gets, she looks after herself, and then she gets thrown into a position where she's responsible for trying to inspire a rebellion. She's not in charge of it though. That's the leaders are just trying to use her, and I really found that dynamic very interesting. So I can see why the Hunger Games is so popular and why things that tried to emulate it went wrong by just misinterpreting why Katniss was such a good character. All right, so then Shadow Rising, book four of the Wheel of Time. I quite liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I fell off with the Wheel of Time the longer I sat with it, but the Shadow Rising is where the story really starts to expand. We have a pretty contained story up for the first three books, and then book four, we just the scope, the world building, this amount of POVs just expands a crazy amount, and the enjoyment for me just it was high on this book, but it dropped off later. And we got another perfection, Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. This one was a reread for me, and if you've watched any of my videos on this channel, you know how much I love this series, so I won't talk too much about it. But grimdark, prose, profanity, violence, plot, world building, just all incredible. Now we have my latest read, The Hunger of the Gods. And yeah, this one was perfection as well. a little bit more plot than the Blade itself, so I'll give it a little bit higher rating. And yeah, Vikings, fantasy, gods, battle sequences, action, fast paced, just go, go, go. Very plays like a movie in your mind with the way John Gwynne writes. If you haven't checked out any of John Gwynne's books yet, definitely check out The Faithful and the Fallen and the Bloodsworn Saga. They're elite. And Of Blood and Bone is a fantastic follow up trilogy to the Faithful and the Fallen series. So next we have Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. This is book one of her Fallen Gods series. It's going to be a trilogy, and there's currently 2 books out. Book 2 just came out about a month ago. I had a really fun time with Godkiller. I think we'll put it at the bottom of Loved It. I think we'll put Stephen E. Erickson just above it on the A tier sort of range. And I think I like that look a bit better. So Godkiller has really good world building, really good writing. So it's in a world where gods can kind of rise up where there's ever a need. So say you break your shoelaces and enough people around you break their shoelaces and you need someone to fix your shoelaces, a god can rise up if you create sacrifices. So you can imagine the sort of issues that can create in the world. There's some political issues going on, 4 different POVs from 4 different characters that are all working towards similar things that come together and just creates for a really fun story. There's a couple issues I had with the writing and one of the twists at the end, but for the most part, it was really good. I also have a full review for that up on the channel too. And we had The Fires of Heaven, and this is just where my Wheel of Time experience was just starting to drop off. I just wasn't having as fun a time. It was just getting a bit too out of hand, but it was still some good things going on. But yeah, just not much to talk about the Wheel of Time. Let's go to a series I had a really fun time with, and that's Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. This is just such a fun read. When you want to break things up and have some shorter reads when you're reading these long fantasy books, and you just want a protagonist that you can't cheer for. He's just morally black, very morally ambiguous, and just causing chaos, killing people, just doing horrible things. Your Gaincraft's your guy. Prince of Thorns is just short, sharp, and shiny, grimdark, and King of Thorns, the book set after it, was even better. The way Mark Lawrence does the Broken Empire trilogy is he has about 4-year jumps between every book, and you get flashbacks of the last 4 years of what York Ancraft has been doing to see how he's grown as a person and developed into an even more badass killer and horrible person. So it's not good character growth, but it's savage character growth. And he just, in book 2, is just, it's a battle takes place in the present, but we get 4 years of how he prepared for this battle, which was very fun to see. Next we have Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. It probably belongs top of A, and I would only give it like a 4 out of 5, but I can't really fault it for much. And the more I sit in it, and at the moment I'm reading more Pratchett, you want to put it at perfection. It's just so fun and enjoyable. It's a great break between dark reads. We'll put it at perfection for now. It could definitely drop, but just, if you know Terry Pratchett, but it's just whimsical, satirical, fun. It's a light-hearted break from heavy reads, but you still have to think and engage your brain when you're reading Terry Pratchett, and it's just such a fun experience. Before They're Hanged by Joe Abercrombie, book 2 of First Law, we'll put right at the end of Loved It. I found Gloctor's storyline to be so much fun. Gloctor's my favourite character, and he gets the best storyline in this book. My 3 next favourite characters get the most boring storyline, so it really diminished my enjoyment of the book, having half of the POVs on a very boring story. But what did save the book was my 2 least favourite POVs. Got a very interesting story up north. That was Dogman and Colonel West. So still a very enjoyable book, but I just didn't enjoy one of the 3 plots. Then we have Lord of Chaos, and yeah, we'll put it at the end of Fun Time, but these Wheel of Time books are starting to creep towards mid. I'm just enjoying them less and less the more of them I read. Next, we had Elric of Monibene, and this was just the funnest read. Such a great way to break up all this big epic fantasy series to read something that's still fantasy. It's still epic, it's still dark, but the story is done in 160 pages. It's just dark fantasy, an epic world, just questing around, just going from thing to thing to thing, interesting characters, and just getting things done really quickly. So definitely very fun. Next up, we have some books by an author that I met on TikTok. His name's Andy Peloquin. He's an indie author, and we just were talking on TikTok, and he sent me a couple of his books. And I definitely was very interested in his books. I'd seen them mentioned on Patrick Leo's channel, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to check out this book, Child of the Night Guild. It was from like a short, high-steamed, grimdark story, which you know is exactly what I love. So I read Child of the Night Guild very quickly. I was like, oh, Andy, this is fantastic. I love your writing. I'm definitely going to read one of your books every month until I get through them, because I don't want to read too many of one author in one go. Otherwise, I can't tell you guys about different authors. I can't just keep telling you guys about the same author. But then the next thing you know, I read another of Andy's books, and then another, and then another, and then another. I've done a lot of videos on these books now, but book one is Viola's apprenticeship in the academy, so her being sold into the academy and trying to learn her skills. It goes through 9 years of her life and finishes with her performing a heist to show her worth to the guild. Book two is her performing the biggest heist the guild has ever seen, and book three has her facing off against a rival crime gang where she's basically trying to save the entire city and all of her friends. So super interesting, super high stakes, super fast paced, action packed, and so dark. I love it. The other two books I read by Andy, one being The Brightest Star, is a side story novella for one of the side characters in the trilogy. And then Trader's Fate, which is set after the trilogy, is a book that is half Viola's POV. She's still dealing with the events of book three, but quite a few years after. And it's half the POV of the hunter. So this is the main character of Andy Peloquin's Darkblade series. And I'm highly invested in checking this one out now after reading Trader's Fate. It was such a good read, just a book put halfway between two series that are both separate, and it was very enjoyable. So if you haven't checked out Andy Peloquin, I highly recommend it. I read 5 of his books in less than a month. If that tells you anything about how much I love him. And I haven't been paid a cent for any of this. Yes, I was given 3 books, and that was it. No commitment asked for. And stay tuned, I will read this one in the next month or two. So also, we had Dune Part 2 come out in this quarter. So I had to read Dune Messiah to find out what's going to happen next. And of course, it's always fun to return to the world of Arrakis and find out what Paul's been up to, what he's been doing. Turned to Arrakis of Dune Messiah to find out what's been going on after the events of Dune. It's set 12 years after the events of Dune, so it's just like an epilogue to book one. So I'm very interested to see what happens in the third book of the trilogy. So as you can tell, there's a lot of big, heavy, grimdark books on this tier list. So I had to get some lighter reading in, and that came in the form of Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is Terry Pratchett meets dystopian sci-fi meets video games. It's comedic, it's action-packed, and it's got a constant element where we're always trying to progress, and we've got a very simple, easy plot where we're just trying to level up and get to the next level of the dungeon to survive. But there's an interesting overarching plot that's slowly building in book one that I'm assuming will develop into each book. And I highly recommend you check it out, or check out my review for that on the channel. Then, of course, we had Empire of the Damned come out this year, and it was absolute perfection. Just one of my favorite reads of the year. Jay Kristoff is my guy. The way he writes, the characters in Empire of the Damned are my favorite characters in all of fantasy, and I love it. And I've talked a lot about it on the channel, so we'll move on to The Sunlit Man, which I didn't read this year, but it made its way onto the list. So we'll put it at the end of Fun Time. It probably should be at the beginning of Fun Time, but this app doesn't allow me to put it there very easily. And then we had Dead House Gates, definitely at top of the A tier sort of book. We'll just chuck it on the end there, but you could say we would put it right around just above Gardens of the Moon. And that one with the Diker and Coltane storyline was absolutely elite. There was some storylines I didn't really enjoy. There's just too much magic going on, and my small brain just couldn't handle what was happening there. But it was a 4.5 out of 5 read for me, so obviously I loved it. And yeah, this was my quarter one for reading. Thank you so much for checking this out. We had 4 5-star reads this year so far. So we had Empire of the Vampire, which was a reread, Hunger of the Gods, which was also a reread. So the only 2 real new 5-star reads we got this year were Empire of the Damned and The Blade itself. So hopefully we can get some more 5-star reads. We've had lots of 4 and 4.5-star reads, as you can tell. and not too many disappointments, thankfully. Hopefully, we can move this even heavier into the perfection and loved it section next time. Um, but yeah, please comment down below what you thought of these books, what your reads were for the year, and yeah, let me know. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been providing for this channel. Every time you like, every time you subscribe, every time you leave a comment, I really, really appreciate it. If you want to read some books with me, I've got a free book club on the Fable app. It's down in the comments. Come join us. We're doing Empire of Silence this month, and then help us pick what we're going to read next month. I'm definitely going to encourage our group to read this book, but we'll pick that together. And if you want to support the channel a little more, I've set up a Patreon for the channel, so there's no requirement for you to do this. It's just if you want to chuck us some spare change my way. There's a section in there where you can put a book in a raffle for me to choose. So if you've got a book that you want me to read each month, I'll just do a raffle. As this is very new, it's very unlikely to be many people in there. So if you do want me to read a book, jump in, tell me what you want me to read, and it's very likely your book will get chosen. But again, no pressure to do that. I've got all my content out here for free. I've got my book club for free. So yeah, have a great day, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in.